Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Seeing 2020's YouTube channel. Today, we have another guest. This is going to be an awesome podcast. This is someone who I've been friends with for a really long time, really respect his knowledge base, and actually did a podcast for him for 3 years ago. This must have been, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm going to add him to the stream here. Jeromy West, JD. Owner of Civitas Law Group. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and let us, get started in this.
All right. Thanks, Adam. As Adam said, I'm Jeromy West. I'm an attorney, the owner and operator of Civitas Law Group. I'm a criminal defense attorney, but my real passion all along has been in constitutional law. As Adam said, we used to do a podcast together, and we discussed a lot of constitutional and political issues. And that's been my passion from the very beginning. And really in criminal defense, we use a whole lot of constitutional law too. So it's not a subject that's totally unfamiliar to me. So.
I remember when you had aspirations of being a taillight chaser, but you switched it on me right in your senior year of law school, right as you finished.
I still chase ambulances. For sure. Criminal defense is my main area of practice, but I do some accident injury also when the cases come in.
Yeah. Well, normally we talk medicine. Our recent film that was just released talks a lot about the pandemic and kind of what's been going on with the pandemic. And the reason why I wanted you on, which you're aware of, and now our audience is going to be aware of, is the fact that there's a lot of talk about this idea of a passport, a vaccination passport. And I had some questions because there's this idea to me that seems like, well, this is less of a medical issue as it is a legal issue. Like, do you have a right to your own medical treatment? And for me, this doesn't just stem to vaccinations. For me, this is like, this could be anything, right? Like, this could be any treatment, any medication, or, once you set the baseline of, yes, you have to be given a vaccine, then you could expand that to any treatment. And lucky for us to have a medical perspective on this, I'm going to be adding Court to the stream. Court.
Hey, Court's here.
We just introduced Jeromy as one of those crazy lawyers, but we just barely got started. And my first question to Jeromy, as we barely get started, this is, what can you tell us about these vaccine passports? What do you know about them? I have an article pulled up, but I wanted to get real quick your understanding of what they are.
So vaccine passport essentially is you get a card that says that you've gotten vaccinated, and certain entities would require it for you to do particular activities. Maybe it's to get on an airplane, maybe it's to go to school, maybe it's to get on a train. Could be a whole lot of different situations, but essentially, just like your passport gets you in and out of the country, this vaccine passport would get you in and out of all the places that I just named, and probably 100 others.
Cool. And I actually just have this article that I pulled up, and it seems to me, based on kind of what I read here, is this isn't really necessarily something that would be just like federal or state. And I wanted to get a little bit into that. Like, what is the history, precedent, law when it comes to the differences between vaccine mandates versus maybe like showing proof of vaccine for certain municipality, use of certain municipalities, right? You may have to get a vaccine to use some public services, but maybe not others. What are we talking about here historically in this same vein?
Okay, so generally speaking, since the passing of the 14th Amendment, we have what's called the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the Constitution. And in the Privileges and Immunities Clause, it essentially says that, excuse me, let me back up. I shouldn't say that the Privileges and Immunities Clause actually states these things, because what I actually mean is that the Supreme Court of the United States has gone in and written a whole bunch of decisions and said along the way, this is what we think they actually meant when they wrote the 14th Amendment, and the Fourth Amendment to a certain extent. we do have court precedent that states that you can't force people to get any medical procedure. We also have court precedent where, and we were actually discussing a little bit before the show in Jacobs v. Massachusetts, where they said, oh, actually, because of smallpox, you can require people to get a vaccine to go into certain parts of town. So the idea of getting a vaccine in order to go to certain places or to enjoy certain events or certain government provided assistance, whatever it is not unheard of. But the question still is, does the Constitution itself permit it? Because Adam, I know you and I have talked about 100 times. Yeah, there's court precedent, and then there's what the Constitution actually says. Our Constitution limits the federal government to only certain enumerated powers. So to start at the federal level, the federal government only has certain enumerated powers that are found in Article 1, Section 8. That's the powers enumerated to the legislature. There's 17 powers there, and none of them are to police the people to make them make the right medical decision. That's not there anywhere. Now, along the way, the federal government probably has said, oh, well, yeah, but, right in this section, we find it in what they call the penumbra, okay? That's that shady spot. If you hold an envelope up to the light, that spot that's not quite shadow and not quite light, that's penumbra. So that's what they're saying. We found it lurking in the shadows of the Constitution.
I like to call that judicial creep. It's just like, it just kind of creeps in, and they accidentally, oh, there it is. Oh, if you squint and you hold it just right and you kind of look between the lines, there it is.
Okay, so I want to say at the outset, if anything I say after this point sounds like I'm defending the vaccine passport, I'm not. Okay? What I am just saying is I think they'll use this case to try to defend it. That doesn't mean I agree with it. Okay? But that being said, the Constitution itself doesn't say that the federal government can do it. It doesn't give that power to the federal government anywhere. The states themselves, though, have a lot more power, right? The 10th Amendment to the Constitution does say that any powers that are not specifically enumerated to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. Not a direct quote, but it's pretty close. Essentially, what that means is that if the federal government doesn't have that power, it's given to the states. Well, the states might actually have the ability to decide on that. The states might actually have the ability to police the people and to require certain medical treatments like a vaccine. I don't think they should be able to, but maybe they do under court precedent.
Now, this one in Massachusetts, this one was, and I think there was another one in New York in 2019, but both of which were actually mandated by the state or the city. I don't think they were mandated by the federal government at all.
No, I think that Jacobs v. Massachusetts there, I think that one was actually the city of Cambridge, if I remember right. Yeah. So it wasn't it wasn't the federal government. It was actually a municipality, and they were saying, well, we have it really bad over here. So if you're going to come in here, we're going to require you to get this vaccine. So it's a difficult topic because a lot of people hear it and they say, well, yeah, because your decision is affecting me. Your decision is making it more difficult for me to stay healthy. If you don't get the vaccine, maybe I don't get healthy. Well, maybe Court could talk a little bit about that. I don't know so much about the medical side of it. I just know that my liberty rights shouldn't be affected by somebody else's, attempt to live their life. But what we do have is that it's not allowed at the federal level. At the state level, we do allow it to at least a certain extent because the schools right now require you to get certain vaccines before you go to school. You can opt out. I believe that there are exceptions. I know that there's exceptions for religious reasons. And if I remember right, I couldn't find this, but I think that they expanded those exceptions just to be, moral exceptions. Don't quote me on that part. But one way or another, there are exceptions to the rule of getting vaccines before you go to school. But they are allowed to a certain extent to require them of their students.
Okay, so there's a clear differentiation between like what they can do on the federal level and what they can do on the state level. And we're kind of seeing that play out a little bit because we have like New York, I think New Jersey has mentioned it. California there's been articles that say that's rumblings in California that it might happen. But like Texas has already said, we're not doing it. Florida has already said we're not doing it. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of judicial arguments and due process on these executive orders or laws or whatever it ends up being, whether it passes through the legislature or it becomes part of an executive order. But help people understand as it goes through this process. There's going to be a lot of people posting on social media. There's going to be a lot of people with very strong opinions on this. Is there a way to kind of help people understand so they can at least both be on the same footing of I guess, facts? There's a lot of opinion outside of that, but what's the core, I guess, facts you would want people to understand? So at least when they have their debates, they're agreeing on the same fundamental foundations.
So the facts are that, number one, you need to look on a state-by-state basis and see, is your state actually granted some power to do this under their constitution? Even if they are, I don't believe that they should be, but that's a different subject. Okay, but it's a state-by-state issue because, as we're seeing here, you got this case pulled up. It's generally the states that require it. A lot of people are going to be asking, well, can I travel to that state? Well, that's actually a really good question. Under the Privileges and Immunities Clause, you do have the right to travel. You have the right to travel to a state and be treated as if you were a citizen who was going to obtain permanent residency. Okay, so if I'm playing devil's advocate, that means that I am literally advocating for their side. That means I would say, well, if you're going to become a permanent resident of our state, we're allowed to require our residents to get vaccinated. Okay, so
okay. And Court will be back on the show. He had to run. He had a little emergency. Had to run out, so he jumped on while he was in the car. But he's driving again, so he jumped off, and he will be back on soon when he gets where he's going. But yeah, keep going. Okay, this is good information.
So essentially, it really could go either way because the right to travel is a virtually unqualified right. So you can travel to any state. You're allowed to be there, get treated like a citizen. But like I said, they may use that argument to say, well, yeah, but we're allowed to require our citizens to get vaccinated. Therefore, we're allowed to require you to get vaccinated because we're treating you like you were a citizen who was going to stay here.
Double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah, it is. The bottom line of it all is that if there is a vaccine passport, if that does pop up, it probably would go to the Supreme Court, and this Supreme Court, I am guessing, would probably do a 5-4 vote against a vaccine passport. And then you bring up issues of court packing. Now, I know that's not the purpose of this podcast, so I won't go into that. But I would make the guess that is where this administration would start saying, well, I didn't want to pack the court, but I think I need to because of that decision.
We're not getting the decisions we want. So Ideally, if we were looking at this on a constitutional basis, like a classic federalist concept, you'd have different laws come out in different states. Those laws would be challenged up to their Supreme Court, probably appealed by the Supreme Court. And ideally, the Supreme Court basically kicks it back down to the state and said each state's allowed to do whatever they want in regards to these kind of mandates, and the citizen can decide whether or not they want to travel to that state. If I don't want to do a vaccine passport, I just don't go to New York. And New York loses out on my economic benefit of going to vacation there. Is that kind of what is a very realistic outcome?
No, I actually think that they would decide against the state's ability to have a vaccine passport. I think this Supreme Court, this specific set of 9 justices, would say, no, it's too much of a burden on your virtually unqualified right to travel. So I think that's the direction they would go.
You can travel there. You just have to have a vaccine. I guess would that be the argument then, devil's advocate?
Right, and then they're saying, okay, so we're potentially stepping here on the right to not have a medical decision forced upon you and potentially the right to travel. I think this Supreme Court isn't going to be willing to walk on both of those, at least kind of not at the same time.
Okay.
So, but that is a huge guess because we have a virtually untested Supreme Court justice in, and I'm embarrassed now because I'm forgetting her name, but our basically brand new Supreme Court justice that we haven't gotten a whole lot of decisions out of yet.
Yeah.
So I'm. You going to do a screenshot of you actually looking her name up?
Yep. Yep. Supreme Court. Let's do it. Supreme Court. We have current members.
I was going to say you didn't want to just look up justices. That might have been quicker, but you got to it. Where's she at?
Is she not listed on here? This is a
no. That can't be right.
Well, let me tell you, this shows you how efficient our government is.
Right.
She's been there for like a year.
Wait, scroll back down.
Oh, wait, here.
There she is, Amy Coney Barrett. Yeah, Amy Coney Barrett. Okay.
Oh, they don't have a picture of her.
Yeah, she just doesn't get a picture after a full year of being or not a full year, but nearly being a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, anyway, it really shows. If they got that wrong, how are they going to get this right? Which actually kind of leads into my next thing, because it seems like these passports might be spearheaded or at least very heavily pushed from private organizations. And so this New York Times article really dives into the fact that it's the International Air Transport Association, and they're saying it's about trying to digitize the process that happens now and make it something that allows for more harmony and ease, make it easier for people to travel between countries and pull out different papers. So eventually it's like a way to put all of the information into one place, one digital place that you can carry with you on your phone, which opens up a whole bunch of potential messes. But
if that's
how does it relate to that private industry?
If we're literally talking about the right of people or the ability of people to travel internationally, Mexico doesn't have our Supreme Court or our Constitution. France doesn't have our Constitution. China definitely doesn't have our Constitution. So look, your right to travel internationally isn't a right. Okay, it's an ability, and any one of these countries can say no, you're not coming in without that vaccine. So look, if it's the other countries requiring it of you, that's completely a whole other ballgame. If you want to go to a country where you have way less rights than you have here, you're already taking at least a small gamble. Maybe not a huge one, but a small gamble by going there and not screwing up and not getting thrown in jail for something, whatever. But if you want to also gamble on getting this vaccine and having a vaccine passport, that's up to you and the country that you're going to. But that's a completely different question.
Yeah. I mean, I had vaccines that I took before I went to Africa. I think I would, I've never been anti-vaccine. I think one of the things that is important is that people be informed and have the right to make their own decisions. And so that's why this conversation is so interesting to me, because it's not really about whether or not you are willing to get it or not. And even the vaccines that are available, some are mRNA, some are more traditional. They have different outcomes, right? There's different companies with different research. You have a lot of choices that each individual can make. It's whether or not they have the right to make that choice.
Right. No, that's an excellent point. And I went to Australia. I lived there for a couple of years, and I was required to get vaccines before I went there. That's because I was adhering to Australian law and not United States law. But it should be said also, I'm not anti-vaccine. A lot of people might hear what I'm saying and say, oh, well, clearly he's anti-vaccine. I'm not. I've gotten just about every vaccine that's been available to me. I don't like diseases. I'm not a big fan. But just like you said, Adam, we have a United States Constitution. We shouldn't be forcing medical decisions on anyone. Everybody should have the ability to look into it. And not to mention, we could go into how quickly this vaccine got to market. I'm not sure I want to be a guinea pig. That's not so much a legal topic, just as it is a personal preference. But that's the great thing about the Constitution and about my rights in this country. I'm allowed to have a preference. And I'm
Yeah.
allowed to say, no, you know what? I'm not going to be one of those first people in the line for the vaccine. If they all want to jump in line for it and then be the guinea pigs and show me that they haven't died or turned into a zombie or anything like that, then that's great.
Yeah.
A few months down the road, I probably will end up getting this vaccine, but not now. Not the biggest fan of the vaccine that's pushed to market that quickly. Court's
Yeah.
back.
And you have antibodies right now anyway.
I do. I had this virus just a couple weeks ago, so I feel like I'm pretty well covered for the time being.
So the next thing I want to talk about, and then I'll throw it to Court because I'm sure he has questions. In particular, I want to hear if Court has anything to say about HIPAA laws, stuff that he knows being in the medical industry that I only know a little bit about. I don't know much. And so the last thing I wanted to touch on real quick, and I'll bring this back up, is the employers. What if any that you know of, employer versus employee rights does someone have when it comes to being forced to get a vaccine? In my mind, if it's a private company, if they require a vaccine, then they can contractually say get a vaccine or you're fired. I mean, how does that apply to, like, Arizona's a right to work state, right? You have the right to quit or be fired for anything, and you have the right to work outside of a union. But if a union, calls and says you have to be vaccinated or you get fired, how does that work? And do you know anything about that?
So I will be the first to admit that I don't know a whole lot about employment law, and the reason being is that employment law steps out of constitutional law. The reason for that, a lot of people want to say, my employer violated my First Amendment rights. No, they didn't. Okay, because the Constitution is a contract between you and the federal government. The Arizona Constitution, the state that we live in, is a contract between you and your state government. Okay, and you also have municipal charters that are a contract between you and your municipality. Okay, but none of them are a contract between you and your employer. Okay, so your employer, the government has made a few exceptions to those situations. They mostly don't apply here.
Civil Rights Act of 1964, stuff like that. Can't be fired for being a certain race or gender.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as vaccines go, they really don't apply, at least not in any way that I can think of off the top of my head here. So your employer, my libertarian tendencies tend to make me say, yeah, your employer, they're a company. They can basically require you to do what they want. I'm going to guess that there are employment laws that say, if for any reason you have a medical condition that does not permit you to do X, Y, and Z, you don't have to do it. I know that there are laws like that in place, and therefore, I would guess that there's something like that for this vaccine. However, I would also guess that there's very few people with medical conditions that would prevent them from getting a vaccine. I'll let Court address that. He'd know a lot more about that than I would.
Yeah, Court, welcome to the party, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. Thanks so much for coming on, Jeremy. The concern and issues I have are, as Adam kind of mentioned briefly there, just HIPAA, and your right to privacy. And, I'm sure you guys have discussed this a little bit already, but it's a very interesting, gray area. As you mentioned, as a libertarian too, I don't want, to see all these, or libertarian leaning at least, I don't want to see a bunch of mandates coming from the state to, say even outlaw passports, so because to me, it's just once you're starting to pass these laws, you're going to continue to have to pass more laws to accommodate for other laws. So, but my question just to you guys and to listeners would be, what do you want as privacy for your healthcare information? And that's how I think about it with myself and with my patients is, this should be your information that's just yours and your families if you want to share it with them or whoever you want to share it with. It shouldn't be anyone else's information. So it shouldn't be your employers, even if they're private. It shouldn't be, Disney World or a cruise line or anybody else's information to know, what you've done with your health personally. That's my thought on it. But I don't know how you actually do allow that freedom to exist and then also allow private businesses to, make up their own rules too. So That would be my question for you guys, or for Jeromy maybe, is what do you think of that? How could that be solved, or is there a solution to still maintain your privacy and your health information, but yet let those independent private businesses make their own decisions and have their rules, I guess?
That's a good point, and I will tell you right off the bat, I don't see a way to balance the privacy issue out, especially with the employer and other businesses, like you mentioned, like cruise lines and things like that, airlines requiring you to show a vaccination passport. No other situation are we required to share our medical information when we get on an airplane. They don't say lift up your shirt and show me that you haven't had your pancreas removed, or whatever. Is there a way to balance it out? No, I don't see it. If you have this passport, and states and municipalities and businesses are allowed to require you to have this vaccine, then no, there is no balance. It's going to be right there in front of them.
It's black or white. Yeah, it's you did it or you didn't. And the nice thing, I mean, not that it's all bad. I mean, I kind of feel the same way, that there's no at least simple solution for that. But we can vote, like they've said, with your feet, or vote with your dollars with businesses. So if you choose not to have that, and don't want to share your information, then you probably wouldn't choose that company. So, and hopefully that will be the case, where those that are more willing to be respect your privacy will be those businesses that are supported, and those businesses that retain the best employees. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if we look at state economics, the ones that have been more liberty leaning have done much better. But when you look at private, I would say corporatist, not free market, but corporatist, they've done much better when you don't go liberty leaning, right? That's your Amazons, your Target, and and Walmart,
you do go
and
liberal
the big companies
leaning.
Yeah, and by that, I by corporatist, I mean control economics through government intervention. These are corporate companies who require you to buy their product because the government has given you no other option. So it is interesting, because it's two totally different things, right? On the corporatist side, they do better with the lockdowns and the restrictions and all that stuff. And on the state side, they do better with more liberty with this vaccine passport thing coming out. I'm curious how that's going to affect, like, are you going to buy from Walmart, where they require you to show your papers, or you just order it on Amazon? Or do you go to the small mom and pop shop to buy your groceries rather than Walmart now, because they don't require a vaccine passport? So I'm really curious too how it's going to affect the day-to-day decision making. If Carnival Cruise Line says I have to have a passport to get on the cruise, but Royal Caribbean doesn't, well, then they've made the choice for me. Like, I'm going to pick the more liberty leading. Oh yeah, they are owned by the same company. They're both owned by Carnival, aren't they?
Are they
Norwegian, I guess. Yeah, Carnival owns by 6 or 7 lines, and I'm so ill-informed with that I'd have to actually look up which companies are owned by what cruise lines, because it's crazy. They're all owned by like 3 companies, but but just as an example, different companies will make the decision for a lot of people by saying we will require it or we won't require it.
Yeah, the employment law is very interesting too, and I think you're right, Jeromy, in that there will be, medical exemptions. That's what will happen, and that's what will happen. That's what's typically happened with, flu vaccines. Is a lot of people have gone for this medical exemption for, various reasons. It's usually something simple like an allergy. They'll claim, and that's how do you refute it? That's the problem. So or the blessing, I guess, if you don't want to get the vaccine. So it could be looked at as anything. But, they pass these laws that are sort of silly, or these mandates that are silly, and there's always options around them, really. It's been my experience. And again, unenforceable laws. These aren't really laws, I guess. These are just private company policy. It's the same idea, as that these are like almost unenforceable policies, like many laws. They're also unenforceable. It's interesting.
Well, and the other thing is that every law, mandate, executive order, policy has the potential of creating a black market, and they're already seeing it. I mean, you can go on Facebook right now and buy forged, vaccine documents already, because for $60 I can go say I was vaccinated and shop wherever I want, or go on that cruise, or go on that trip to Europe.
Do you happen to have a link to that page? Totally asking for a friend.
Well, and that's, my wife asked me that. She's like, so let's assume, because we like cruises, we would love to go back on a cruise if they ever open, but we would prefer not to be vaccinated, or have them even know if we're vaccinated or not. That's our business. So I may end up being vaccinated because I may be required by an employer, but and in my situation, I may not have an option around it unless I quit working. Or I lie and claim I have some medical condition that I don't have, so, but either way, we said, so if you do lie, who's going to verify these CDC quote unquote cards that anyone could just photocopy and white out their name and put in a new one? Or these days with digital Photoshop, you could, anybody could do it. So it's not even, you wouldn't even have to go to a black market to have a paper copy of something that, well, they're obviously not. Go ahead.
Sorry, Court, didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say my favorite exemption is the religious exemptions for vaccines, because I have friends at church that have told me, no, we tell them the religious exemption. And I just go, wait, what part of our doctrine prevents us from getting vaccine? We go to the same church, right? Yeah, I'm here at church with you. Okay. But, there's people that just say religious exemption, and nobody bothers to look up and see, hey, do the Baptists, do they prevent vaccines? What about the Mormons? What about the Jehovah's Witnesses? What about Jews? Nobody bothers to look it up.
Yeah.
Even though we all have a pretty fundamentally good idea that.
Or was it just me?
Did we cut out? No, I thought we cut out there for a second. We back?
All right, we did, but we're back. So it's
okay. We're back. Well, anyway, that was about the end of my point anyway. And I've got to wrap this up, gentlemen, but I think we're about at the end here anyway, aren't we?
Yes, sir, we are.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say thanks to everybody watching the podcast. Jeromy, thank you so much for jumping on. There's a lot more we could talk about. And honestly, audience, if you have questions about this, we would love to have Jeromy back on in the next couple of weeks. So ask questions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this channel. We're going to be rolling out more information about all of this stuff every week. Thank you guys so much, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, Jeromy.
Thanks.